7 and 10, only on Talk Radio. It's the open university of the airwaves. It's the last free space on the mainstream media. Use it or lose it.
It's the scourge of capitalism, the foe of fascism, the enemy of inequality, the arch-enemy of the aristocracy, and Good Housekeeping Magazine's Rare of the Year 2007. The Mother of All Talkshows with George Galloway on Talk Radio. I'm going to hunt him down.
That was 2007, though. In fact, I met the man, the magic voice behind most of these stings in a London club, as they say, in the week with another of my heroes, and I'll speak more about what they've got in mind later. Now, I'm going to start with the $400 slaves that you can buy in Libya today, yesterday, and I presume tomorrow. $400 for your very own black slave at one end of Africa, the northern end. All of this courtesy of David Cameron, William Hague, Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, Nicolas Sarkozy, the dwarfish thief who was briefly the president of France, and other scoundrels and criminals. They destroyed Libya, and black people were like strange fruit for a time, twisting in the wind from the trees in Libya. The country has been broken into 3 governments, 4 prime ministers, no army, no border, a non-state, and through which, of course, huge floods of hapless refugees have departed, only to sink in the Mediterranean. I mention it not just because it's worthy of itself that in 2017 there are slave markets in a country liberated by NATO, by us, but because it contrasts with other parts of Africa that are more significantly in the news. It's a strange kind of coup that has taken place in Zimbabwe, where the deposed president dons a gown and a mortarboard and heads for a university to give out prizes to cheering students. About that more later. But Zimbabwe has been a major part of my life. I know it well. I was the only boy in my school that could pronounce the Reverend Ndambaningi Sithole. Easy for you to say. The Reverend Ndambaningi Sithole was one of our stooges. He turned out to be a real dodgy pastor, as did Bishop Abel Muzorewa. Why am I bringing these characters up? Well, they were the choice of the apartheid regime that ruled in what was then called Rhodesia, when Robert Gabriel Mugabe was in the bush leading a liberation army to overthrow an apartheid that was supported to the nth degree by the bigger apartheid state across the border and by friends of apartheid everywhere, including in the British Conservative Party. Many of you only know Robert Mugabe as a clown, a 93-year-old man absurdly decked out in colourful suits and cowboy hats, with a greedy and grasping 50-year-old wife whom he appeared to be grooming to take over from him. And that's a pity, because Robert Gabriel Mugabe was once something, really something. He was a Jesuit, educated, Marxist intellectual, who decided as a young man that he would not tolerate apartheid in his land, and that he would settle for nothing less than one person, one man, one woman, one vote in what was then called Rhodesia. For that crime, he was arrested and incarcerated and tortured for 9 years under the racist Fink who ruled Rhodesia at the time by the name of Ian Smith. When freed from prison Mugabe went into the training camps in the bush, in neighbouring countries, particularly Mozambique, where he set about fashioning a liberation army that had to wade through rivers of blood to liberate his people. Now, don't get me wrong. I made it clear a moment or two ago what I think of the idea of a 93-year-old president being succeeded by his wife. And I was never a Mugabe supporter in the first place. Hey, how about that? Actually, Mugabe was the choice in the end of the British ruling elite and the international ruling elite. I was a supporter always in that liberation struggle of his rival, Joshua Nkomo, and his army and party. I never supported Mugabe in the first place. And I think it's long past time for Mugabe to demit office, spend his life in a mortarboard, going round giving out prizes at universities. The fact that there are universities and schools, and that Zimbabwe is the most literate country in Africa, is something that should not be forgotten. The fact that Zimbabwe is a potentially rich country which got off to the worst possible start when the promise of British money to fund a soft landing for a redistribution of the land of Zimbabwe to the people who tilled it rather than the white owners who owned it. The reneging on that deal that Mrs. Thatcher and Lord Carrington made got everything off to a very bad start in Zimbabwe. Now, I'm making all of these points because it's very, very difficult for me to watch all these people who once supported apartheid in Rhodesia dancing on Mugabe's grave. Not least because his grave doesn't look to be dug yet. Who knows what the final outcome of this will be? The most dignified way would be for his wife to go to one of her 5 or is it 6 multi-million-pound bolt holes in Dubai or in South Africa or in Singapore or in Malaysia or anywhere else that she has them, and for Mugabe to live out whatever is left of his days as an honoured freedom fighter and former president. I've only met Mugabe once, and I didn't even actually meet him. We were in the same room in Malaysia, the best part of 10 years ago. But I did see him punching the air at one or two of the points I made in my speech. That's not why I'm defending his legacy here this evening. It is because younger viewers and listeners need to know that the apartheid racist system of white rule in southern Africa was a cause célèbre of international capital, right-wing politicians in Britain, in the United States and elsewhere. This was not some aberration. They saw themselves as having been given by somebody, God maybe, a mission to steal other people's land, settle white colonists on it, and exploit it for evermore, using the African people as hewers of wood and drawers of water, and that the last thing they would ever have was the meaningful right to vote to choose a government of their own. So, when you hear Mugabe being routinely rubbished, as you have been over the last 48 hours, just remember that which I have spoken of. And in the run-up to the British budget, a survey has been announced which showed that a death toll of 120,000 people in Britain have been killed by austerity. Just think about that for a moment. 120,000 of the poorest people, the oldest people in Britain have been killed by our own government's political choice to follow a policy of cuts upon cuts upon cuts, all wielded upon the most vulnerable, the weakest, the poorest, the oldest in our society. Nye Bevan once said that the Conservatives were lower than vermin. Actually, he was understating the point, because none of this austerity was necessary. None of it has achieved anything at all. The national debt has tripled in the period of austerity. It was a political choice, and as I've said here many times, it was the declaration of class war by the rich upon the poor. And now we're told, through carefully calibrated leaks in the financial press, that austerity is going to be buried by Philip Hammond. It's going to be finished, terminated, but not buried in as cold a grave as the 120,000 people whom it killed in just the last 8 years. And we'll be talking about Donald Trump. Where is he? What have they done with him? He hasn't tweeted for a whole day. Now that is concerning. Norma! Is it Norma? No, not Norma. Who's the lady down in Hove? Trump's representative on Earth. We need to hear from her tonight. What's happened to our Donald? So, Zimbabwe, austerity, Donald Trump, and all associated Russiagate measures and matters. It's all coming up over the next 2.5 or more hours on the Mother of All Talkshows.
Talk Radio, digital debate for the UK.